The night was quiet in the outskirts of Millbrook, Arizona. The Carter house, a modest wooden home with a wide front porch, sat at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by open land. The only sounds were the distant hum of crickets and the occasional rustling of dry leaves in the wind. Under the glow of a flickering street light, Titan sat motionless, his golden brown coat blending into the shadows. His amber eyes, sharp and calculating, surveyed the street ahead, ears twitching at the slightest sound. A black SUV slowed to a stop 2 houses down. Inside, 4 men dressed in dark tactical gear observed the house through night vision binoculars. Their leader, Vincent Moretti, a man with a scar running down his left cheek, held a phone to his ear. Target confirmed. The dog. Just a pet. Titan's ears twitched. His body remained still, but his breathing shifted, controlled, measured. His combat instincts, buried deep beneath 2 years of civilian life, began to stir. From inside the house, 12-year-old Lily Carter sat at the dining table, absent-mindedly twirling a pencil between her fingers as she stared at her unfinished homework. Across from her, David Carter, her grandfather, leaned back in his chair, sipping from a steaming cup of coffee. His silver hair was neatly combed, his posture relaxed, but his keen eyes flickered toward the window every few seconds. "Titan's doing it again," Lily mumbled, glancing toward the front door. David followed her gaze. Through the glass, he saw the large Belgian Malinois standing rigid, scanning the road, the same way he had for the past 2 years. "He senses something," David muttered. He set his coffee down and rose to his feet, his military-trained instincts kicking in. Lily frowned. "It's probably just a raccoon or something." David didn't answer. He moved to the window and peered outside. A dark shape lingered in the distance, an SUV, idling too long at the curb. His fingers unconsciously tightened into a fist. A gut feeling told him this was no coincidence. Titan let out a low growl, barely audible but filled with warning. His muscles tensed, eyes locked onto the shadowy figures moving inside the vehicle. In the SUV, Moretti signaled to his men. "Move into position," he ordered. 2 figures slipped out of the vehicle, their movements swift and practiced. They approached the house from opposite sides, staying in the cover of darkness. Their steps were silent, their hands gripping silenced pistols. Titan's growl deepened. He turned toward the door, his instincts now fully engaged. David Carter took a deep breath. He knew exactly what this meant. Trouble was coming. David Carter's hand moved instinctively to the locked drawer by the kitchen counter. His old service weapon rested inside, a relic from his years as a sheriff. He didn't open it yet. Instead, he exhaled slowly, forcing himself to think. Rushing could get them killed. He turned to Lily, his voice calm but firm. "Go upstairs. Now." Lily hesitated. "Grandpa, what's a go?" His tone left no room for argument. She swallowed hard, grabbed her notebook, and rushed toward the stairs. Titan didn't move from the door, his ears tracking every faint sound. He could hear them, 2 sets of footsteps closing in, one from the backyard, one creeping along the side of the house. His lips curled slightly, revealing a hint of teeth. Outside, Moretti's men reached their positions. One, dressed in dark jeans and a leather jacket, crouched near the back door, pulling out a small tool to quietly disengage the lock. The other, heavier built with a buzz cut, moved toward the side window, testing if it was unlocked. Both were professionals, quick, silent, efficient. But they had made a fatal mistake. They assumed the biggest threat was the old man inside. The back door's lock clicked. The man in the leather jacket grinned, easing the door open an inch. No alarm. No resistance. He pushed it wider and stepped inside. Titan moved like a ghost. No warning. No bark. One moment he was still. The next he was airborne. 80 pounds of muscle and precision launched at the intruder's gun hand. Teeth sank deep into flesh, crushing tendons. A strangled scream erupted as the man staggered back, his weapon clattering to the floor. Before he could react, Titan twisted midair, his powerful hind legs slamming into the man's chest, sending him crashing into the counter. Plates shattered. Coffee spilled. The man gasped for air, blood dripping from his mangled wrist. David didn't waste a second. He yanked the drawer open, grabbing his pistol. A quick step forward, a firm press of the barrel against the intruder's temple. "Move, and you die," he growled. The second man outside heard the commotion. He abandoned the window, raising his pistol. His mistake. Titan was already in motion. He lunged through the side entrance, a blur of fury. The attacker barely had time to turn before the dog's jaws clamped onto his forearm, twisting violently. Bone cracked. The gun fired a single, wild shot that embedded harmlessly into the wooden floor. Then he was down, screaming, as Titan pinned him with the precision of a trained war dog. Moretti cursed from the SUV. What the hell is going on in there? Then, through his earpiece, he heard something chilling. A low growl. Deep, controlled. A sound no ordinary pet would ever make. Titan lifted his head, blood staining his muzzle. His eyes locked onto the SUV. He was ready for the next fight. Lily Carter sat on her bed, heart pounding, ears straining to hear the chaos downstairs. The walls weren't thick enough to block out the sounds crashing furniture, muffled screams, the low, menacing growls of Titan. She clutched the stuffed bear her father had given her years ago, fingers digging into the worn fabric. Then, silence. Seconds stretched into eternity. She forced herself to move, creeping toward the door, pressing her ear against the wood. Footsteps. But they were slow, steady. "Grandpa, Lily." David's voice came from the other side. "It's safe now." She hesitated before unlocking the door. The sight that met her sent a shiver down her spine. One man lay motionless on the floor, moaning, his arm bent unnaturally. Another sat slumped against the counter, his wrist wrapped in a blood-soaked towel. Titan stood between them, his massive frame tense, ears erect, watching them like a hawk. Lily's breath hitched. "Grandpa, what just happened?" David sighed, rubbing his temple. "Something bad. And it's not over yet." He motioned toward the table. "Sit down." She obeyed, though her hands still trembled. Titan followed, sitting beside her, his warm body pressing against her leg. The dog's presence grounded her, though his fur was still bristled with adrenaline. David poured himself a glass of whiskey, took a slow sip, then exhaled. "I need you to listen carefully, Lily. No questions until I'm done." "Understood," she nodded. He set the glass down. "Years ago, I was the sheriff of this town. Back then, your father my son worked for the D. He got tangled in a case, something big. Mexican cartel operations running drugs through the border. But it wasn't just drugs." His fingers tapped against the wooden table. "It was something worse. Human trafficking. Weapons deals. Government officials being paid off. Your father uncovered evidence that could bring the whole operation down." Lily's stomach twisted. "And that's why they..." David's jaw clenched. "That's why they killed him." She sucked in a sharp breath. David looked away, gripping the edge of the table as if anchoring himself. He knew they'd come for him. So, he made sure the evidence didn't die with him. Before his last mission, he left something behind, something they want. His gaze met hers, intense and wavering. "And they think I have it." Lily's pulse pounded in her ears. "Do you?" David didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, he nodded. Outside, the distant roar of an approaching engine sent a ripple of tension through Titan's body. David's face darkened. "They're not done yet." David stood, his movements quick and practiced, pulling the blinds down with 2 fingers. Outside, the black SUV that had been idling earlier was gone, but he knew better than to think they had given up. They weren't the kind of men who walked away from a job and finished. He turned back to Lily, his expression grave. "We don't have much time. Pack a bag. Essentials only. We're leaving." Lily's stomach twisted. "Leaving where?" David grabbed an old duffel bag from the closet and tossed it onto the couch. "Safe house. We can't stay here." He glanced at Titan, who remained near the door, posture stiff. The dog could sense the shift in tension. He was waiting, analyzing, ready to act the moment danger returned. Lily didn't move. "Grandpa, this doesn't make sense. If they want the evidence, why don't we just give it to them?" David zipped the bag open, retrieving an old metal lockbox. "Because it's not that simple. This isn't just about them covering their tracks. If this gets out, it destroys everything they've built. They'll do whatever it takes to keep it buried, even if that means killing you and me to make sure no one ever finds it." Lily's breath hitched. "So, what do we do?" David hesitated, then softened, resting a hand on her shoulder. "We do what your father would have done. We make sure the truth gets out." A car door slammed outside. Titan's ears snapped forward, his body shifting low. A deep, low growl rumbled from his chest. David didn't hesitate. He grabbed his pistol from the counter, chambering around. Lily, go out the back. Take Titan. Run to the old ranger station. Lily's pulse pounded. What about you? I'll hold them off. Titan let out a short, sharp bark disagreeing. He wasn't leaving David behind. David looked at the dog, his expression unreadable. Then he exhaled. All right, boy. Looks like you're staying. A voice shouted from outside. Carter, we know you're in there. David's jaw tightened. He motioned for Lily to stay low. It's time to fight smart. Titan bared his teeth. The war wasn't over yet. David Carter's grip tightened around the pistol as he moved to the front door, his every step deliberate, calculated. Titan remained beside him, muscles coiled like a spring, eyes locked on the dark figures standing beyond the porch light's reach. Through the narrow window, David counted at least 3 men, armed, trained. Not the kind of low-level thugs who made mistakes. Moretti's voice carried through the night. Come on, Sheriff. You know how this works. Give us what we came for, and nobody gets hurt. David scoffed under his breath. Yeah, sure. And I'm the damn mayor of Phoenix. Lily, crouched low behind the couch, clutched her backpack straps, knuckles white. Every instinct told her to run, but her grandfather's words rang in her ears. Wait. Watch. Think before you move. Titan let out a low growl. David whispered without taking his eyes off the door. Easy, boy. Not yet. Moretti sighed theatrically. All right, Carter. Have it your way. A hand signal. One of his men stepped forward, raising a suppressed pistol. The moment his finger curled around the trigger, Titan launched. The door burst open before the gunman could fire, and 80 pounds of war-trained fury hit him like a missile. Teeth sank into flesh. A sickening crunch of bone followed. The man screamed, his gun spinning away into the darkness. David stepped out right behind Titan, firing 2 quick shots. The second gunman crumpled before he could react, his body hitting the gravel with a dull thud. The third man scrambled backward, fumbling for his radio. Shit, they've got a blur of motion. Titan released his first target and lunged again. His weight slammed into the third attacker's chest, knocking the air from his lungs. The man hit the ground hard, skull bouncing off the pavement. David pressed the barrel of his pistol to Moretti's forehead before the bastard could even flinch. Call them off. Moretti's smirk didn't waver. You think killing me stops this? David exhaled slowly. No, but it'll feel damn good. Moretti's radio crackled. Boss, backup's 2 minutes out. Titan's growl deepened. David didn't wait. He struck Moretti across the face with the butt of his gun, sending him sprawling. Then he turned back toward the house. Lily, we're moving. Now. Lily bolted from her hiding spot, already shouldering her backpack. Titan fell into step beside her, his breathing controlled but his fur bristled with adrenaline. David's truck was parked around back, half hidden in the shadows. He shoved open the door, starting the engine in one smooth motion. Get in. Lily hesitated only a second before climbing inside. Titan jumped into the passenger seat. Headlights appeared down the road. More were coming. David slammed his foot on the gas. The chase had begun. The truck's tires spun against the gravel before gripping the road, launching forward with a roar of the engine. Lily clutched the seatbelt across her chest, eyes darting to the side mirror. Headlights closed in fast. Moretti's back up. 2 SUVs, their engines growling like predators closing in on prey. Titan sat rigid in the passenger seat, his amber eyes locked on the approaching vehicles, body tense but controlled. He wasn't just a dog. He was a soldier. David kept one hand on the wheel, the other reaching for the revolver resting on the dashboard. Lily, I need you to do exactly as I say. She nodded, breath shallow. Glove box. Open it. Her fingers fumbled but found the latch. Inside, a spare magazine, a folded map, and a burner phone. She grabbed the phone and looked at him. Who do I call? Detective Mason Brooks. Number's already in there. Tell him we're heading west on Route 9 and we need a roadblock. Lily's hands shook as she dialed. The phone rang once, twice. Then a Brooks. Lily's voice came out uneven. It's Lily Carter. We've gunfire up to behind them. The rear windshield shattered. She screamed, ducking instinctively as glass rained down. David cursed, swerving the truck. Hold on. Titan snapped his head around, his ears flat against his skull. The gunfire didn't startle him. It fueled him. His muscles coiled, instincts screaming for action. Brooks' voice yelled through the speaker. Lily, what's happening? David snatched the phone, pressing it to his ear. "We're being chased." Route 9. 2 SUVs. Armed. Brooks didn't hesitate. "Keep moving. I'll have units ready at the state line." David tossed the phone back to Lily, gripping the wheel with both hands as he took a sharp turn onto a dirt path leading into the hills. The truck jolted violently, the tires kicking up a thick cloud of dust. Behind them, the SUVs followed, their beams cutting through the darkness. More bullets whizzed past, one embedding itself into the side mirror. Titan growled low. He wanted to act. Lily gritted her teeth, her fear morphing into something else: determination. "Grandpa, they're getting closer." David's gaze flickered to the rearview mirror. "I know." He reached under his seat, pulling out a small, metal canister. Smoke grenade. Military grade. Titan, ready. The dog tensed, muscles rippling beneath his coat. David pulled the pin with his teeth and tossed the canister out the window. A second later, thick white smoke erupted behind them, swallowing the road. The SUVs disappeared into the dense cloud, their drivers blinded. Tires screeched. Metal crunched. One vehicle veered off course, skidding into a ditch. Lily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. David pressed harder on the gas. "We just bought ourselves time." But not much. Titan lifted his head, ears twitching. He knew it wasn't over yet. David kept his foot pressed against the gas pedal, the truck bouncing violently over the uneven dirt road. Behind them, the second SUV tore through the smoke cloud, its tires screeching as it swerved back onto their trail. Morty wasn't giving up. He wanted them dead. Titan stood rigid in the passenger seat, his body vibrating with pent-up energy. He could sense the fight wasn't over. His amber eyes locked onto the pursuing vehicle, calculating. Lily stole a glance at her grandfather. "We can't outrun them forever." David's jaw clenched. "We don't need to. We just have to make it to the ranger station." A new sound ripped through the air: a helicopter. Lily's heart plummeted. She twisted in her seat, eyes widening at the dark shape hovering in the distance. A searchlight flicked on, sweeping across the hills. Morty had called in air support. David cursed under his breath. "They're pulling out all the stops." A burst of automatic gunfire erupted from the SUV. The truck's rear tires jolted as bullets tore through the metal. David fought the wheel, keeping them steady. "Lily, down," he barked. She ducked instinctively. Titan's growl rumbled deep in his throat. David's mind raced. He needed an opening, something to break the chase. The ranger station was still miles away. They wouldn't make it like this. His eyes darted to the left, spotting a steep embankment leading into a dry riverbed. Risky, but their best shot. He made his decision in a split second. "Hold on." He yanked the wheel hard, sending the truck veering off the road. The vehicle tilted sharply before slamming down onto the riverbed below. Dust and rocks exploded into the air. Titan braced himself, muscles tight as he absorbed the impact. Lily screamed, gripping the dashboard. The SUV hesitated at the edge of the embankment. Then, its driver made the mistake of following. David's lips curled. "Got you." As the SUV plunged down, its front bumper clipped a jagged boulder. The vehicle flipped violently, rolling twice before landing on its side. Flames burst from the engine. David didn't slow down. He pushed forward, weaving through the dry riverbed, using the terrain as cover. The helicopter's searchlight swept past them but failed to lock on. He took a sharp turn, driving beneath a natural rock overhang. The chopper circled, unable to see them. Silence. For the first time since the chase began, David exhaled. His grip on the wheel loosened. Lily stared wide-eyed. "Did we lose them?" Titan remained tense, ears twitching. David shook his head. "Not for long." He pointed ahead. "We move fast. The ranger station is our last chance." Titan's gaze locked onto the distant horizon. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. David maneuvered the truck through the winding riverbed, keeping a steady hand on the wheel as the dust settled around them. The engine growled in protest, metal groaning from the earlier impacts, but it held together. For now. Lily sat stiffly beside him, her fingers digging into the seat. She kept glancing over her shoulder, expecting to see headlights reappear at any moment. Titan, however, was different. He wasn't looking back. His amber eyes were fixed forward, ears twitching at every sound, calculating their next move. The war dog knew the real danger wasn't behind them, it was ahead. David tapped the dashboard-mounted compass. "We're 5 miles from the ranger station." If we keep off the main roads, we can make it before sunrise. Lily swallowed. And then what? David exhaled. Then we figure out how to end this. A distant rumble cut through the night. Helicopter rotors. Lily's stomach twisted. They're still searching for us. David nodded. We stay low. The terrain gives us cover, but if they spot movement, we're done. Titan suddenly tensed, his ears snapping forward. A split second later, David saw two faint lights moving in the distance. Not from the helicopter, but from vehicles. Multiple. They were cutting across the hills, heading straight for the ranger station. Moretti was already one step ahead. David clenched his jaw. Damn it. They're trying to cut us off. Lily's voice wavered. What do we do? David's grip tightened on the wheel. We beat them there. He pressed the gas. The truck lurched forward, bouncing over the rocky terrain. The battered tires struggled for traction, spitting up loose gravel as they sped toward the only place left to take a stand. Titan braced himself against the dashboard, his body swaying with the motion. Every muscle in him was wound tight, ready to react the moment the fight reached them. Lily's fingers curled into a fist. She wasn't helpless. Not anymore. Her father had taught her things before he died: how to read a situation, how to stay calm when things got bad. Right now, she forced herself to breathe and think. She turned to her grandfather. If they get there first, we don't have a chance, do we? David didn't answer. He didn't need to. Lily's gaze flickered to the glove box. Inside was the spare magazine, the burner phone, the folded map. Pieces of a plan forming in her head. Titan growled low. He could smell what was coming. The Carter family wasn't running anymore. They were heading straight into the fire. David pushed the truck harder, the engine roaring as they tore through the uneven terrain. The ranger station was close, barely 3 miles away now, but Moretti's men were closing in from the other side. Headlights bobbed through the darkness, weaving between the trees. Their vehicles built for rough terrain. They had the numbers. They had the firepower. But David had something they didn't. Titan. The war dog sat rigid, ears twitching at every sound, his powerful chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. He wasn't afraid. He was waiting, calculating. Lily glanced at the side mirror. They're moving fast. We won't make it before them. David's fingers tightened around the wheel. He had spent years as a sheriff, used chasing criminals through these hills. He knew the shortcuts, the hidden trails. He just had to take a risk. Hold on. Without warning, he yanked the wheel hard to the right, sending the truck crashing through a narrow gap in the tree line. Branches whipped against the windshield. The tires skidded over loose dirt before catching on firmer ground. They were off-road now, cutting through the forest, heading directly toward the station. Lily braced herself. They're gonna see us. They already see us. David shot back. Now we make it harder for them to follow. Titan turned his head, his keen eyes locking onto the approaching vehicles. He could hear the revving of their engines, the shouted orders over radios. They were gaining. A gunshot rang out. A sharp crack as a bullet zipped past the truck, tearing through a tree trunk. Lily yelped, ducking low. David cursed. They're getting desperate. The ranger station's silhouette appeared through the trees. A small, weathered structure built decades ago, surrounded by a rusted chain-link fence. It wasn't much, but it had what they needed: reinforced walls, emergency supplies, and more importantly, radio equipment strong enough to broadcast beyond Moretti's control. David slammed the gas. Almost there. But then, another set of headlights appeared directly in front of them. Moretti's men had beaten them to the station. A black SUV skidded onto the dirt path, blocking their way. Doors flew open. Shadows moved. Gun barrels glinted in the moonlight. David's hands clenched the wheel. Lily's breath hitched. Titan didn't hesitate. He growled deep in his chest, every muscle in his body primed for battle. They had walked into a trap, and Titan was ready to spring it. David slammed the brakes, the truck skidding to a stop just feet from the black SUV blocking the road. The dust hadn't even settled when the first gunshot rang out, a warning shot that sent a dull echo through the trees. Moretti's men emerged from the shadows, weapons raised, their faces obscured by the harsh glare of headlights. 5 of them, maybe more, lurking in the dark. David's grip tightened on the wheel. He had to choose his surrender or fight. The first wasn't an option. Lily's pulse pounded. Grandpa, I see them. His voice was calm, controlled, but his mind was racing. Titan's growl was low, guttural. He crouched slightly, muscles coiled, amber eyes locked onto the nearest target. He wasn't just watching. He was waiting for the command. One of the men stepped forward, his stance confident, like someone who had already decided how this was going to end. He was tall, broad-shouldered, a scar running along his jaw. His pistol rested lazily in his hand, but the way he carried himself told David everything he needed to know. This guy was a professional. The man smirked. End of the road, Carter. David didn't answer. His mind measured distances, angles, weaknesses. His own gun rested on the seat beside him, but it wouldn't be fast enough against 5 armed men. He needed a distraction. Lily's fingers twitched. She could see it in her grandfather's eyes. He was calculating something. Then she looked at Titan. His entire body was coiled like a spring. He was waiting for a single word. The man with the scar took another step. Boss wants you alive. The girl too. The mutt. Not so much. His smirk widened. So, be smart. Step out. Hands up. Titan's growl deepened. David glanced at the dog. Just a flicker of a glance. But it was enough. Titan lunged. The war dog was a blur of motion, closing the distance before the nearest gunman could react. Jaws clamped onto a forearm. A sickening crunch. A scream. The man's pistol clattered to the ground as he collapsed. David moved. He grabbed his gun and fired twice, taking down the second man before he could aim. Chaos erupted. The other gunmen scattered, trying to get clear of Titan, who was already moving again, weaving through the confusion like a shadow. Lily ducked low, her heart hammering, but she didn't freeze. She reached for the spare magazine in the glove compartment, just like her father had taught her. More gunfire. A bullet slammed into the truck's hood, sending sparks flying. David cursed. They were still outnumbered, still trapped. They needed cover. He grabbed Lily's wrist. Run. Now. Titan turned at the sound of his voice, his muzzle stained red, his amber eyes searching. They weren't out of this yet. They had only just begun to fight. David yanked Lily behind the truck as another bullet tore through the air, missing them by inches. The men regrouped fast, recovering from the initial ambush. One of them shouted into a radio. Reinforcements were coming. They had to move. Now, Titan whipped around, his muzzle dripping with the blood of the first attacker. His sharp eyes locked onto David, waiting for the next order. No hesitation. No fear. Only focus. David spotted an opening 10 feet away, past the SUV, a gap in the fence surrounding the ranger station. If they could reach it, they'd have cover. But they had seconds, not minutes. He turned to Lily, his voice urgent but steady. You're gonna run. As fast as you can. Don't stop. Lily's breath hitched. What about you? I'll be right behind you. Titan too. More gunfire erupted. Bullets punched into the dirt, kicking up clouds of dust. The gunmen weren't aiming to kill yet, they still wanted the evidence. But that wouldn't last. David squeezed Lily's shoulder. Go. She didn't hesitate. She bolted toward the fence. Titan moved with her, his powerful frame keeping pace, eyes scanning for threats. David waited a fraction of a second longer, then fired 2 more shots, forcing the remaining gunmen to duck. He sprinted after them, reaching the fence just as Lily scrambled through the opening. Titan leaped effortlessly over the twisted metal, landing beside her. David wasn't so lucky. A bullet tore into his shoulder just as he reached the gap. The force spun him around, knocking him to the ground. Pain exploded through his body. He gritted his teeth, fighting against the wave of dizziness. Lily gasped. Grandpa, Titan snarled, his stance shifting instantly. His handler was down. That meant one thing. Attack. The war dog launched himself back through the fence, charging the nearest gunman before the man could react. His teeth clamped onto the shooter's wrist, twisting violently. The man shrieked, his weapon dropping. Titan pivoted, using his weight to drive him backward, slamming him into the SUV with a sickening crack. David forced himself up, blood seeping through his jacket. His body screamed at him to stop, but he shoved the pain aside. Lily was watching him, wide-eyed. We have to go. Titan turned back to them, his chest heaving, his eyes still burning with combat readiness. He had cleared the path. David stumbled through the fence, gripping his wounded shoulder. He didn't have time to slow down. Moretti's men were still coming. The ranger station was only a few yards away. But getting inside was just the first battle. The real war was about to begin. David staggered up the steps of the ranger station, his shoulder burning with every movement. The wooden door loomed ahead, a heavy relic from another era. He reached for the handle, but Lily was faster. She shoved it open, holding it for him. Titan slipped inside first, scanning the room with sharp, precise movements before giving a low, confirming huff. Clear. David collapsed against the nearest wall, his breathing ragged. Blood soaked his jacket. He forced himself upright, shaking off the pain. Lily, lock the door. Barricade it. She didn't hesitate, sliding the deadbolt into place before grabbing an old wooden chair and jamming it under the handle. Titan stayed close to David, his intelligent eyes flicking between the door and his injured handler. He could smell the blood. He knew his human was hurt. David waved him off. I'm fine, boy. It was a lie, but Titan obeyed, turning his focus back to the danger outside. Lily spun toward her grandfather. You're not fine. You got shot. David exhaled, rolling his shoulder with a wince. I'll live. He motioned to the far wall, where an old radio system sat covered in dust. See if that thing still works. Lily ran over, flipping switches, adjusting dials. Static crackled through the speakers. Outside, tires screeched. More vehicles arriving. David forced himself to his feet. His mind worked through the situation. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and boxed in. The ranger station was sturdy, but it wouldn't hold forever. Moretti wasn't the kind of man to wait. He would come hard and fast. A voice crackled through the radio. Low. Hello. This is State Patrol Unit 6. Identify yourself. Lily's eyes widened. It's working. She pressed the button. We need help. My name is Lily Carter. We're trapped in the old ranger station on Route 9. Armed men are after us. David grabbed the mic. This is Sheriff Carter. Badge number 8721. Moretti's crew is here. He's bringing everything he's got. Silence. Then, copy that, Sheriff. Hold tight. We have units en route. David clenched his jaw. How long? 20 minutes. Too long. A gunshot rang out. The station's front window shattered. Lily screamed, ducking as glass rained down. Titan reacted instantly, positioning himself in front of her, teeth bared, grueling. David cursed. Moretti wasn't waiting. He was making his move now. Through the shattered window, headlights blazed, illuminating the dust-filled air. Shadows moved outside, shapes of men spreading out, taking positions. A voice called out, Moretti's. Carter, you know how this ends. Give me the evidence, and maybe I'll let the girl live. David chambered a round into his pistol. His voice was ice cold. Come and get it. Titan lowered himself into an attack stance. The final fight had begun. Moretti's men moved fast, spreading out around the ranger station, using the trees and darkness as cover. Muzzle flashes lit up the night as another volley of gunfire ripped through the wooden walls. Splinters exploded across the room. Lily ducked, her arms covering her head as bullets tore into the furniture. Titan didn't flinch. His ears twitched, tracking every sound, calculating every movement outside. His eyes locked onto the door. That's where the breach would come. David stayed low, pulling Lily behind the heavy wooden desk. Stay down, he ordered, voice tight with pain. His shoulder burned, but he ignored it. He checked his ammo. Half a magazine left. Not enough. Titan let out a deep, rumbling growl. A warning. David followed his gaze. Shadows shifted outside the door. Heavy boots crunched against the dirt. Then silence. Moretti's voice cut through the night. Last chance, Carter. David exhaled. Go to hell. The explosion came a second later. The door blew inward, with shattering as a flashbang detonated. The blast sent Lily reeling, ears ringing, vision blurring. Titan reacted first, leaping into the smoke-filled entryway. A man stepped through, rifle raised to late. Titan's jaws found his wrist. A scream. A gunshot fired wild into the ceiling. The man crumpled as Titan twisted, using his full weight to bring him down. Another attacker rushed in. David fired. The man dropped. Titan spun, releasing his first target just as a third man lunged. A knife flashed in the dim light. Titan dodged, his war instincts kicking in. The blade sliced through the air, missing by inches. The attacker swung again. Titan ducked, then surged forward, slamming into his ribs, knocking him back through the doorway. David grabbed Lily's wrist. We move. Now. She was still dazed, but she nodded. More men were coming. They needed to get out before they were overwhelmed. Titan backed toward them, his stance low, teeth bared, blood on his muzzle. His eyes flickered toward David, waiting. David clenched his jaw. Titan, cover us. The war dog understood. He turned back toward the open door as more shadows rushed forward. Titan charged. David didn't wait to see the outcome. He grabbed Lily and ran toward the back exit. They needed to get to higher ground to hold out until backup arrived. Gunfire erupted behind them. Titan was buying them time. But David knew this wasn't just a fight. This was survival. David shoved open the back door, dragging Lily with him as bullets slammed into the walls behind them. The cold night air hit like a slap, but there was no time to think. They ran. The ranger station sat at the base of a rocky hill, and David knew if they reached higher ground, they'd have a fighting chance. His shoulder throbbed, his breathing ragged, but he pushed forward. Lily's legs burned, but she didn't complain. She gritted her teeth, following her grandfather up the uneven terrain. Behind them, Titan fought like a demon. The war dog was outnumbered, but he was trained for this. Every move was precise, every attack lethal. Moretti's men had expected a pet. They got a soldier. Titan ripped through one attacker's leg, sending him crashing to the ground. Another swung a rifle, trying to knock him away, but Titan ducked, countering with a savage bite to the wrist. A gun fired. A scream. The man collapsed. Titan didn't stop. He turned, eyes blazing, ready for the next fight. David and Lily reached a rocky outcrop. David spun, raising his pistol just as two men burst through the back door, rifles ready. He fired first. One dropped instantly. The second hesitated. Lily threw a rock, striking him in the temple. It was enough. David's second shot took him down. Titan sprinted up the hill, blood streaking his fur, his breath heavy but controlled. He reached them just as headlights reappeared on the road below. More vehicles. More men. Moretti wasn't stopping. David pulled Lily close. This is it. We hold here. Lily's hands trembled, but she nodded. Titan stood at their side, battered but unbroken. Below, Moretti stepped out of the SUV, a rifle in his hands. He looked up at them and smiled. End of the line, Carter. David exhaled slowly. Then, in the distance, sirens wailed. Moretti's smile vanished. Titan bared his teeth. This fight wasn't over. It had just turned. The wail of approaching sirens cut through the night like a blade. Moretti's expression darkened as he glanced toward the road, where flashing red and blue lights flickered in the distance. His men hesitated, their confidence wavering. They had come expecting an easy kill. Now they were caught between a firefight and the full force of law enforcement. David kept his gun raised, breathing hard. His body ached, his vision blurred slightly from the blood loss, but he stayed on his feet. Lily crouched beside him, gripping a rock like it was her last line of defense. Titan stood tall, his chest heaving, his fur matted with dust and blood. But his eyes never left Moretti. He was ready. Moretti exhaled, gripping his rifle tighter. This doesn't change anything, Carter. David's voice was steel. It changes everything. The first police vehicle screeched to a stop near the ranger station. Armed officers poured out, weapons drawn. A commanding voice boomed through a megaphone. Drop your weapons. Hands in the air. Moretti didn't move. His men exchanged glances, uncertain. Some started lowering their guns. Others stood frozen. David took a slow step forward. It's over. Moretti. Moretti's jaw clenched. He looked up at David, then at Titan. His smirk returned, but there was no humor in it. You think this ends with me in cuffs? He chuckled darkly. You don't know who you're dealing with. David's grip tightened. I know enough. Moretti's fingers twitched near the trigger. Titan tensed. A single wrong move, and he would launch. Then Moretti dropped his gun. The tension snapped like a broken wire. Officers swarmed in, shouting orders, forcing Moretti and his men to the ground. Handcuffs clicked. The fight was over. Lily exhaled sharply, her whole body shaking. David let his gun lower, his knees nearly buckling. Titan stepped closer to him, pressing his weight against his side, steadying him. A familiar voice called out, Carter. Detective Mason Brooks pushed through the officers, eyes scanning the scene. He took one look at David's bloodied shoulder and exhaled. Damn, old man. You never make it easy, do you? David smirked through the pain. Wouldn't be fun otherwise. Brooke's gaze shifted to Lily. "You okay, kid?" Lily nodded slowly, though her fingers still trembled. "We did it." Titan let out a low huff, his tail flicking once. Brooks turned toward the officers loading Moretti into a patrol car. "This bastard's going away for life." David watched as Moretti was shoved into the vehicle. Their eyes met one last time. And for the first time, Moretti looked afraid. David exhaled. It's finally over. Or at least, he hoped it was. The sun was beginning to rise by the time the last of Moretti's men were hauled away. The flashing police lights faded into the early morning haze, leaving behind only the lingering smell of gunpowder and the echoes of the battle that had just ended. David sat on the back of an ambulance, his jacket peeled away so the paramedics could tend to his shoulder. The bullet had gone clean through, painful, but not fatal. He had seen worse. Lily sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her. Her hands had stopped shaking, but her mind was still racing. Everything had happened so fast. Too fast. Just hours ago, she had been doing homework at the kitchen table. Now, her life would never be the same. Titan lay at her feet, his breathing steady but his body still tense, still alert. Even now, he was watching, listening, protecting. Detective Brooks approached, hands in his pockets. "For what it's worth, Carter, you did the right thing." David gave a tired chuckle. Didn't feel like it at the time. Brooks smirked. "Well, you took down one of the most dangerous crime bosses in the country, so I'd say that's a win." He glanced at Lily, then at Titan. "And you had some damn good backup." Lily managed a small smile. She looked down at Titan, running her fingers through his fur. "He saved us." Brooks nodded. "More than once." He turned back to David. "The evidence your son left behind, it's enough to dismantle Moretti's entire operation. His contacts, his money trails, everything. He's finished." David exhaled, finally letting himself believe it. "Good." Brooks hesitated, then added, "But you know this isn't the end, right? Moretti's people won't forget this." David's expression hardened. "I know." Brooks studied him for a moment, then sighed. "You should lay low for a while. Both of you." David looked at Lily, then at Titan. He reached down, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Yeah," he murmured. "We will." Lily leaned into Titan's side, feeling the warmth of his body, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. He wasn't just a dog. He was family. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt safe. Titan closed his eyes, finally allowing himself to rest. The war dog had done his job. And for now, at least, the fight was over.